Hello, everyone. Welcome to Developers Can Do Everything. We'll just give it a minute for people to come on in, and then we'll get started. Okay, so let's go. Thank you to everyone for coming. We're going to do a webinar this afternoon. Probably take about half an hour, 3/4 of an hour or so, plus some time for questions. And we're going to talk about how developers can do everything, or how I believe they can, and maybe I can convince you as well. So my name is Matt Saunders. I am the slightly ominously titled Office of the CTO DevOps Lead for Adaptavist. So that means I work in the office of the CTO, helping out on all things DevOps. My background is in sysadmin and a lot of DevOps. I also run the London DevOps Meetup group, so we get together on a regular basis, have some talks, and I'm an editor for InfoQ on their DevOps news stuff. But yeah, most of all my day job is at Adaptavist is sprinkling all the good DevOps stuff onto what Adaptavists do across the Adaptavist group. So yeah, so thank you for coming. Let's kick it off, and let's kick it off with a poll. So if you want to just, you should see a poll popping up. I can see it now on the screen. I'd like to ask you before we get going, how would you rate the current level of developer productivity in your organization? There's some multiple choice questions there for you there. So if you want to just give that a moment, make your choices, sealed bids, no second chances. And off we go. So thank you for that. So I don't know if you can see, can everyone else see the results? I'm not sure. But basically, most people have said high developer productivity in your organization. So that's excellent. That's really, really good news. What are you doing on this webinar? You don't need to do anything. That's fantastic. No, I'm joking. So many people believe that they have high developer productivity, and I'm not going to diss that and say that people don't. But what I do know through Humanitech is that 87% of organizations said that improving developer productivity was a priority. And I guess if everyone's already got high developer productivity, then you want to go very high anyway. So I think we're all on the same page here with that. So what are we going to talk about in this webinar? I'm going to talk about some dreams. So what developers dream of at night, and where we want to get to on developer productivity, and talk through some things that maybe seem a little idealistic in a big organization, and how big organizations can be a problem in implementing high developer productivity and getting software done. Then we'll go through the goal of platform engineering. It's a hot term at the moment. Lots of people talking about it. lots of good stuff in the industry about how to do this well and how not to do it well. And we'll talk about online CDEs, so that's cloud development environments, and IDPs, so internal developer platforms. And then at the end, hopefully, I'll convince you of how to bring all of that stuff together into one lovely cohesive whole that gives you high developer productivity, where developers can do everything. So pressing on, here's the dream. We start inevitably with a ChatGPT generated image. ChatGPT, of course, doesn't seem to be able to spell. So for those of you new to Adaptavist, I know it's a complicated word to spell, but it's not like that. But that's one of our coders asleep at night with his Harry Potter glasses on, thinking about what do I actually need to be able to get my job done, to be able to get software delivered quickly, effectively, safely, securely. So let's give it a little stab at working out what that might be. So devs inevitably want good source code management. It's been a good few years since this became an accepted norm. If you haven't got good source code management, if you don't have version control, if you don't have things checked in centrally into a repository, then all sorts of bad things happen. Very important for testing, for collaboration, etc. All those good things. Devs also want a deployment pipeline. Long gone are the days where devs would be building some software on their laptops, copy a binary up somewhere onto a server, off it goes. Oh, oops, I copied the wrong one there. Oh, that was the wrong version. Oh, oops, I've forgotten a library here. We're hopefully past those times, but it still happens. No, it doesn't still happen. Everybody wants a good deployment pipeline, either in GitHub or Bitbucket, in centralized CI/CD system. It's the way to go. And a release system. So it's not just good enough building some code and copying it onto a server and making it run. There's detail there around when deployments go out, how it's different whether a piece of software is deployed or actually live and in use. So lots and lots of good stuff going on there. Things have got more complicated, they've got simpler, but by and large, we've got to a situation now where devs are empowered to be able to build and develop their software, to deploy it and get it released out into the wild and in front of customers. So that's a lot of good stuff that devs want. But also, what do they really want? What can we do to get devs happier in their local environment, in their overall workflow of how they're getting stuff done, over and above those three things, which I would argue are largely solved. Well, they want a development environment, and that again is maybe a semi-solved problem. But it's an area that we find organizations don't necessarily pay enough attention to. Maybe developers have a good IDE, a good integrated development environment on their laptops, and they're happy coding within that. They've got coding suggestions, they've got syntax highlighting, maybe built-in interfaces into CI/CD systems so that they can control everything that they want to from locally, or maybe they don't. But they want these things to be instantly available and responsive to iteration. So what I mean by that is you write some code, you change a bit of code, you want to compile or build that software and make sure everything still works, and be in a position where you can get into a good feedback loop with your software development and delivery. And they want environments that are similar to production. So the use case I often talk about here is that it's fairly simple to give a developer an environment with a laptop, maybe one like this, with the same software on it as they're running in production in this similar sort of environment. But maybe your production environment has got 1 million users. That's not necessarily a trivial thing to deliver into a development environment. But what we can do is get the same versions of things. We can get similar execution strategies, the same sort of run times, maybe software packaged out with Docker so that you know that what's running on your laptop is going to be the same as what ends up in CI and is going to be the same as what goes to production. So, well, yes, well, let's just do it, surely. Um, a lot of this stuff is available self-service. There are some solved problems that I've already talked about here. And I'm going to talk about how self-service is a really powerful thing. Um, when you're doing these things as self-service, so when you've got a provisioned development environment, you've got provisioned environments for testing and building your software, making sure it works, integration tests with other components. It really does empower developers to get stuff done, because the worst kind of scenarios you get here are where perhaps someone has built some software and they want to go and test it against a load of other components that are already live. And so they need to spin that up in some cloud infrastructure, maybe AWS, GCP, pick your cloud provider of choice. Studies have found that if developers can be spinning this up on their own, if they can have instant access to this, they don't have to wait for tickets. So you don't have to send in a ticket saying, hello, dear sir, hope you're having a lovely day. Please can you provision me an environment, blah, 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 blah. It's really key to getting those feedback loops. So DevOps 101, those quick feedback loops working, where people can self-serve on things. It allows people to get started right now, and you get a bit of reduced seduction, which I want to talk about in a bit. So let's take up another poll. We've talked a little bit about self-service. Haven't talked about IDPs yet. That's integrated development platforms, but maybe you're using them. Is your organization using any of these? So there's the poll on the screen. Slightly easier one this time. You've only got 3 options. If you want to give that a mash that button somewhere, and let's see what you say. All right. Thank you very much for voting. Let's get those results up. Oh, not that slide yet. Here's the results. So we've got a good split here. About 50-50 between either using self-service and IDPs or planning to. So everyone's convinced. Nobody's saying no, basically, to that. Again, it's a fairly well-established thing that doing these things is good. Obviously they are, because otherwise my slides would be moot, of course. So I talked about seduction. What we tend to find is that if you can't provide software, if you can't provide services to your developers and to the people who are building your software, then they'll get seduced by other things. And that's not a terrible thing. I mean, I can tell you, for example, here at Adaptavist, we have some great platforms for deploying software out, and yet some of our devs choose to use other platforms like this one, perhaps. Maybe you're using it, I don't know. And that's actually okay, because there's a temptation to say, well, no, you must use our platform. You must use everything that we provide. And this is borne out in studies such as in the Team Topologies book by Manuel Paes and Matthew Skelton, very, very clearly that if you build self-service things for people, and if they are not really easy to use, and if they're not very transparent and quick, then people will go elsewhere. And I would expect nothing else we have good, intelligent devs. These are not the sort of people who just do what they're told. They use their own brains, they solve their own problems. And we're not expecting them to solve all of their own problems, because that's why we have platform teams. But there's nothing wrong with going off and being seduced by something else. And indeed, these sort of things can be good fodder for working out what to do next at the platform. So, can you actually self-service everything? So I've worked in environments, in fact, we've had some Adaptavists, I must admit, where you have these brilliant lofty goals, providing everything through self-service, and you start working on making forms, making portals to go off and deploy everything. And then and maybe building CI/CD pipelines is a simple one. A little button to create a new repo, fairly simple one to do. Not actually all that simple, but in the context of what I'm about to talk about, comparatively simple. But can you self-service everything? Can you self-service all of these things? So yeah, repos, pipeline, yeah, easy peasy. We've been doing that for 10 years, no problem. Yeah, put the name of your repo you want, click bish bash bosh, off it goes. There you go. Deployments, yes, great. Feature flags, maybe, yes. If you want to be deploying shared things, networks, security groups in AWS, firewalls, cloud accounts, load balancers, all these things, it starts to get a little bit murky, and you get this kind of friction in the desires to actually to go off and build and deploy these things for developers to be able to deploy themselves. Versus the risks of doing so, and the amount of control you might need to put around things. So yeah, should you let developers build all of those things? It's a tricky one, but I'm going to say yes. You got to aim for the stars with this stuff. As I said earlier, developers having to wait for things is an absolute productivity killer. It's not just a productivity killer, it puts you into a position where you're then going off into an environment where, because the developer wants something or needs something, and forgive me if I'm making them sound like prima donnas, I'm really not. It's not that at all. It's about developers being in control of what they're doing and having the autonomy and the purpose to go off and do these things. So all these things on this list, I think you should be aiming for self-service on them if you want to be able to scale up your teams and get your developers happy. And they're not difficult. No, they are difficult. A lot of them are difficult, but all these things are codifiable. So if you're thinking, well, actually, I don't want my developers fiddling with firewalls. I want to give them a set of firewall rules that's going to work for them. Well, that can be codified. You can use the knowledge and the depth of experience that you have across your teams to codify these things in advance. A lot of the time, you see people filling in forms and saying, "Hi, can I get some firewall rules?" Or no, let's say a load balancer. Can I get a load balancer? And it's pretty much exactly the same as the previous one. It's based on rules and desires come up with probably semi-organically through between developers, operations people, security people, compliance people, etc. And someone's either remembering or copy and pasting off a wiki somewhere what these rules look like. Codify all that stuff. It's not difficult. Yes. So yeah. So can you? Yeah, you definitely can. Should you? That might be a different question, maybe. But let's go into the how. So I've touched on this a little bit. And I would encourage you to, when you're looking at codifying process, codifying ways of working into self-service pipelines for developers to use, have a look at how you would actually do that. And in a lot of cases, you will find that you really can. And you'll also find if you're getting resistance to this sort of stuff, it's usually some sort of cultural / political thing going on. Maybe a team wants to maintain control of firewall rules across your cloud infrastructure. Also great talking points. If you can be highlighting the fact that I hesitate to use the word limitations, but it kind of is. These limitations exist within your organization. Then that's a great opportunity for a conversation about maybe shifting around the way that things are done. So how would you do all these things? Talk to people. As I said a few minutes ago, all of these organizations that we work in have got such a breadth of knowledge and experience that it's not necessarily that hard to get to what good looks like, sorry. What the best practice is around building out infrastructure and building out those things that are hard for devs to access normally. But you can only get there with a highly consultative approach. So you're talking to people, you're finding the people in your organization who want to make these things work. The people who maybe are slightly siloed, and can benefit from having a lot of the work that they have to do automated. Which is the next point. The great thing about figuring out how to do these things in a repetitive way is that you can automate them. Automation is great because you get consistency through automation. You get the same thing every time, and it happens quickly. It's not human prone. It's not prone to error. Fractional ownership is a nice concept I like to introduce here. I mentioned silos a couple of minutes ago. Very often you'll get teams who are very, very dedicated to their little individual piece of making things work, and probably quite a high sense of responsibility for those components. Maybe they even have to report on them. Maybe they have metrics in KPIs around availability of things that they don't want other people touching. When you're going off and automating, building these things and maintaining them, it's quite a good opportunity to look at fractional ownership of them. So you're passing some of the responsibility for running them across to the devs. Your devs don't have to then become firewall engineers or load balancer engineers or all these other things that we don't really want to put the cognitive load onto the developers for. But you can start to shift things in your organization so that these things are run in a lot more fractional way. SMEs, again, you have these people, subject matter experts across the business who know what good looks like, who know how to do these things in a good way. Well, let's empower them. Let's empower them to get their stuff into code. Let's codify the whole infrastructure. Let's codify everything we do. It sounds dangerous, but if you're doing this based on what the best people in your business know, then maybe it isn't so at all. Yeah, slightly out of place here, but versioning APIs. So let's talk about something slightly different, which is that if you've got an IDP, for example, going off and talking to lots of different components, you can still be changing those components. You can version them. It's a microservices idea, which if you're familiar with that world, I'm sure you know how to operate. So what I'm saying with this last point is slightly incongruous here, apologies. The last point here is that once you've decided how to build all this stuff and how to automate it, it doesn't necessarily have to stop there. You can keep on innovating. Maybe you start using new services from your cloud provider. Maybe someone just decides there's a better way of doing things. You can lead people down a route where they can be using newer versions of code without having to re-release everything. So let's talk about CDEs and IDPs. Sorry, we've gone a bit acronym crazy now. CDEs, cloud development environments, and IDPs, internal developer platforms. So CDEs are basically a whole development environment that's online. I talked earlier about having an IDE, an integrated development environment running locally. There's plenty of products out there doing that, from the likes of JetBrains as Microsoft VS Code. Maybe you just use Vim, I do. All these things going on your laptop. What tends to happen is that you've got a whole lot of great stuff going on in your laptop and the illusion of integration with a load of cloud services. So maybe your production environments all running in AWS. Well, that's great, but when what you're running on your laptop can't really run on AWS. So CDEs are a relatively new initiative to basically put that development environment in the cloud as well. So everything you need is in the cloud, which means that you don't have to have local setup issues. So you don't have to have all your laptops looking exactly the same, so everyone's got the same development environment, unless that's what you want, which is equally possible with a cloud development environment. And you get high integration with CI/CD systems, with deployment systems, and often with the actual release of the software into the cloud environment. And yeah, central authorization, authentication, and management all centralized, so that it becomes much easier running a larger team where you've got a CDE to manage the group of users who are using those systems. So let's do another poll. Let's talk about cloud development environments, and you tell me, how significant do you think CDEs will be on the future of software development? So again, we're up to 5 choices here, but let's see what you come up with. Okay, so and the results. So significant is the overall answer there. So we've got 2/3 of people are saying it's going to be a significant thing, and 1/3 very significant. So yeah, I think that just underlines what we just said. So Gartner, in the Gartner reports from last year, can't remember the name of it, sorry. Oh, there it is. It's the Hype Cycle for Emerging Technologies 2023. It says that by 2026, so only a couple of years away, that 60% of cloud workloads will be built and deployed using CDEs. So that's showing quite a significant push away from local and more into the cloud. So much as infrastructure has moved away from data centers, away from being things that you can run locally on a laptop, we're now seeing a push to a world where all that stuff's happening remotely and happening in the cloud. Many options here. Here's one that we like, Gitpod. Great option there. Everything integrated. You can set up as many developers as you like on Gitpod. We're big fans of Gitpod here. And CI/CD just basically baked in there. It's a couple of lines of configuration to get your software built, and put in some authentication details, and you can have your software deployed out to the cloud of your choice. So again, I've talked about this a little already, where development environments are starting to get coupled and get tightly coupled together. So you have source code management, CI, continuous integration, and deployment all together. These things used to be very, very different disciplines, and actually the overhead in joining these 3 things together can be quite significant. Dev environments like this tend to bring security scanning to the table as well. We're living in a new world here where things like generating bills of materials, doing DAST and SAST security scanning is increasingly important, given the amount of abstractions that we have in the software world, the amount of libraries and packages that we pull in from the internet that could have anything in them. They generally don't, but it's a need. And having all these dev environments all working together already means that putting security scanning into them is almost a slam dunk. And we're also starting to see generative AI helping us along. So we've got 29 minutes in before I mentioned AI. I'm very proud of myself. So AI is starting to help, especially in these cloud environments where you can be pushing out new versions of what the cloud environment looks like. So the development environment looks like constantly, which matches quite nicely to how fast the AI world is evolving. So we're getting things like code suggestions coming into the development environments, and all sorts of other innovations happening there. So the other great thing about products like Gitpod, and there are others are available. There are many of them out there. For example, Amazon have Cloud9. There's many of them. Is that because these things are actually a bit closer to the cloud anyway, the integrations can be a lot deeper. So we used to do a lot of work where our deployment environments would be configured as probably an access key ID and a secret key for AWS, and that was about it. These days, we're seeing a lot deeper integration with all of these major cloud providers. Here's one we like quite nicely. Again, another one I haven't mentioned yet, GitLab. Great package. It's all your CI/CD, the whole SDLC, all in one. So yeah, big fans of GitLab here. So yeah, a lot of this stuff is easy to change and easy to implement if you work in a small organization. We find a lot of times people running in startups are probably towards the front of the curve, ahead of the curve in deploying out these new and cool ways of doing things. Life might not be like that if you're in a bigger organization. So there are a few things to tackle here when you're looking at deploying out perhaps the cloud development environment or internal developer portal. I know I haven't talked about them properly yet. In a larger organization, things like the thought of having AI looking over all your code and potentially sending it up to an LLM somewhere is a significant thing for everybody. And it can be increasingly difficult in bigger organizations that maybe already have policies around this sort of thing. Also, just developing your software in the cloud is a significant change to where you have either locked down or properly secured corporate laptops where all the good work is happening, and yet now it's like it's in the cloud. It's a bit more scary from a standardization and compliance perspective. We also have issues with technical debt in big organizations where maybe you want to be using all this new cool stuff, but you can't. You're held back because of decisions you've made in the recent past. And multi-generational platforms, by which I mean the issues where you have perhaps you have bimodal, trimodal software delivery going on, where you don't necessarily have components of your infrastructure which are applicable and appropriate to go off and run in a CDE or using some of these more modern ways of working. So those can be tricky. Security and AI as well can also be tricky. But there's an answer to all of this, surely. And again, we're going to talk about platform engineering now. So, do you have a platform engineering team? Dedicated one? 4 choices? Yes, no, in the process? Not sure? Have a vote while I have a little sip of water. Okay. Thank you. So, interesting spread of answers here on this one. So we've got 33% yes, 33% no, and 33% in the process. So yeah, platform engineering is happening. Some people are saying it's just a rebranding of what DevOps is, or what DevOps used to be, or a rebranding of what SRE is or used to be. But platform engineering is a thing. Let's go into what the goal of that actually is and how it helps your developers and helps them to do everything. Well, yeah, that's what it's there for, really, I think. We're there to provide everything that devs need as a platform engineering team. And again, it sounds like, haven't we been here before? Isn't this what like DevOps was, or half of DevOps was? Maybe not. One of the innovations we're seeing in platform engineering is that good teams that are doing this well, and I've hinted at this earlier when I was talking about codifying the best practices around automating things for devs. So as you see, we're kind of coming back to developers can do everything. Good platform engineering teams are working out what their devs need, but not in isolation. They're talking to the other areas of the business, the people who are talking in their other ears, saying, well, this stuff needs to be secure. We need to report on it. We need to audit these things. These logs need to go to this place, etc. That's one of the big goals of platform engineering. And of course, self-service. I've said so much about self-service on this webinar, I probably won't say anymore, apart from that it's a really good thing. So we want everything, everywhere on demand. We have everything self-service. Devs can just go and get it when they want. I've talked already about how that is a good thing, how removing the friction from the process of getting infrastructure and repos and firewalls and all this sort of stuff set up automatically using best practices is a real game changer for organizations. So here's an IDP. This is Backstage, or well, strictly speaking, Backstage is a framework that you can use to build an IDP. And this is all about the concept of putting together a portal for developers. So your devs need some stuff, well, let's not make them click around 17 different sites internal sites to get the things that they want. Let's put it all together. Let's wrap up things like repo creation, pipeline creation, security scanning, infrastructure, all those things in a single interface. Backstage doesn't really do anything. The whole power through Backstage is through the plugin systems that you use to provide the exact things that you need your developers to have. And then you have them all in one place. You have them centralized and gives you an opportunity to report on things, metrics, graphs, all through the power of the Backstage plugins. According to Port, 85% of organizations are building an IDP or intend to do so this year, which is huge. Really, really big numbers going on, and it proves the value of these things. Either that or it's just another flash in the pan, but I don't think so. Gartner again saying that IDPs provide a curated set of tools, capabilities, and processes. They're selected by subject matter experts and packaged for easy consumption by development teams. So if you're getting your security people, your compliance people, your operations people to be contributing best ways of working or best setups through the power of automation and code, put it all into an IDP. That's what it's kind of there for. It's like it's a container for all this good stuff. Not that sort of container. Another quote here on what IDPs are. Self-service comes to the fore again. A self-service layout. This is from the CTO of Humanitech. Self-service layer that allows developers to interact independently with their organization's delivery setup, enabling them to self-serve environments, deployments, databases, logs, anything else that they need to run their applications, and all based on this, on the results of these the SMEs coming up with this stuff. So this is from Ops Level, or some source from Ops Level, another provider of IDPs. So an IDP is a central hub to begin development activities. So you've got a new initiative that you're trying to kick off, and you want to start. And rather than sending endless tickets, getting things created to get yourself bootstrapped, wearing yourself out as a developer in the first week of the project, just getting things set up. The idea is that you have a central hub with self-service templates and actions to get you going nice and quickly. And you're combining what are the leading features that you've come up with within your organization based off of a consultative way of doing things. So yes, so let's talk through some of these again. So we've got Backstage from Backstage from Spotify. Spotify use this thing internally, and yeah, they're doing all right. Again, a framework. So it's not just something that only works if you've got infrastructure exactly the same as Spotify's. You can plug in anything to do with creating repos, creating log shippers, monitoring, observability, etc. It's all there, it's all out there, and a lot of it is publicly available as plugins. So yeah, so early adopters are often building and succeeding on Backstage. So people who are adopting this technology early have built and succeeded. Let's just talk a little bit about build. Again, so you can go and build Backstage-based things and glue them together. I was at a conference yesterday and talking to some people who are working on Backstage, and actually gluing these plugins together is a little bit difficult at the moment. So the buy option is decreasingly attractive because they're making it better, they're making it easier. But you can go out and buy the service. You can buy Backstage implementations from companies like Rody. We've also got one of our own at the Adaptavist group called Venue, which is just getting off the ground. It's a really exciting portal basically for empowering teams to get their development and delivery done really, really quickly. So let's bring all this together. How are we doing on time? 40, okay. Bring it all together. IDPs open the door to mature engineering. So we've got all that wealth of knowledge of how to do things across the organization, common practices of how things are done. Let's automate them. Let's put them in a nice portal that does it for you, or prevents you with a single interface that does it all for you. CDEs are coming just around the corner. The majority of work we think will be done in CDEs by 2026. And big organizations can use those people that you have in your organization who know this stuff, who have the local knowledge of how things work best in your organization. You can use that and amplify it, force multiply it to define these scalable best practices of how to provision our infrastructure. So just a few more takeaways here. Obviously, we're automating everything. We're codifying everything. A lot of these, I think, I'm just coming back to a lot of these things, which again are good common practice and have been for a long time. And I hope you'll see how, in the context of what we talked about around developer experience and allowing developers to do everything, that they're doubly important. So yeah, let's put everything in a repo. Nobody's leaving things lying around, not in a repo. But everything in a repo, it means that other people can collaborate on it. You can work more openly. You have consistent, you can have a consistent approaches to coding styles or and consistent ability to audit things and review, work together. Repos, yes, they're great. So devs love ephemeral test environments. So an environment that can be spun up quickly and hasn't been broken by the previous team that used it. It has a good, well-defined, codified environment, all the other components of your software stack that they need to interface with. Test everything. One of the ways that this initiatives to automate things often fall down is that there's that almost intuitive piece of testing that goes on when people do things manually. So that they go off and go and create something, and they're looking at certain things to make sure that whatever process they kicked off actually worked and did the right thing. When you start to try and automate that, then the fact that a lot of this is subconscious or learned knowledge can be missed. And so you can be creating automated things that just fail in weird and wonderful ways. Need to get that knowledge out of people's heads. Test everything. Test it again. Yeah, this stuff needs to be bulletproof. What we end up with is a situation where devs are going to be clicking buttons and a whole load of things are going to be going on behind the scenes. And because we've automated them and we want them to be going off quickly, it can be quite hard to trace when they don't work. So let's test it again, put more tests around these things, make it visible how they're working or not working. Spoiler, they won't work to start with. You're going to need a few tries at getting this right. Deploy often. Again, Gene Kim, DevOps, 2014, however long ago it was now. Feedback loops, absolutely crucial. Tighten them up. Get these things going so that you're not only deploying your software, but deploying the software that deploys your software, the software that builds and maintains the infrastructure that your devs need. You get that in a frequent release cycle. It's just like any other piece of software, in that it gets better by being deployed more frequently and by being worked on by more people. Rinse and repeat. So yeah, give your devs a button to press. Devs love buttons. Devs love buttons. It gets them started quickly. It lets them get everything that they need. Quite a lot of devs don't like talking to people anyway, so having a button instead of having to send tickets is great. But no, seriously, it's, as a dev, you want to get stuff done. You have, you know what you need to do, and in the nicest way, we as organizations are really good at putting obstacles in their path and making them go through ticketing systems and filling in spreadsheets to get the things that they need that they can't just control on their laptops. So give them a button to press. They'll love you for it. Encode your SMEs in the platform, all that local knowledge, which is being, I was going to say wasted. It's not wasted, but it's slightly buried. All these good people who know how to do things in good ways, let's encodify their knowledge. It doesn't mean to say that we're not going to need them anymore, because they're still going to be there for when the world moves on, when you need to do something slightly different. But let's codify those things that are repeatable tasks, that are easily delegated to automation. IDPs are great for centralizing knowledge as well as the tasks. So I talked about putting in a system where the portal lets you go and create the piece of infrastructure you need. It also becomes a de facto documentation hub. So the readmes from your code are just instantly available within the IDP. It's a great place to put other cross-cutting documentation, with careful reference to whatever existing wikis and knowledge bases you've got. So let's not forget that devs are customers of a platform engineering team or a platform engineering function that is building an IDP or leveraging a CDE and deployment environments. If you treat them like customers, then you'll get a better solution. After all, they are trying to write code to service the overall customers of the business. Treat these people like customers, talk to them, communicate, high contact, work out what they need, work out how you can make their lives easier, and they will then make your life easier because they'll be happier, because they'll be able to work quickly and efficiently and without friction. So yeah, developers can really do everything. Should we let them do everything? Well, within reason, yes. I think hopefully I've explained to you how and why that could work. There we go. That's it. I hope your developers can do everything now. Have a think about what we talked about. Yeah, my name's Matt from the Adaptavist group. Any questions? Here we go. How does the AI bubble help or impact developers? Is it going to change the way IDPs and CDEs work? Yes, yes, it is. How does it help and impact? Well, I think we've had a lot of evidence of people starting to use AI and people putting AI into their products. So, for example, our friends, we're partners with GitLab. There's AI functionality in the IDP now, which can do things like giving you code suggestions. It can write a load of code for you. And I think the AI answer is very much the same as where we are with it in general in the industry, which is that everyone's really scared of what it's going to get wrong or that it's going to take over the world. But I think the code suggestion stuff is actually quite a good one, because we're not suggesting that just because the AI says you should write your code in a certain way that you should, but it's giving you a great starting point. And I'm seeing, and I'm sure you're seeing, how developers are using AI for a lot of boilerplate stuff, maybe writing documentation for code, and these things are only going to get more cleverer. They're going to get better. I'm not saying they're not clever now, because they are pretty damn clever. The other thing is that, especially with CDEs and using online versions of or SaaS versions of these products, we're in a good position to leverage the innovation that's going on in those products around AI. The world is changing so fast. The AI models that we're using today are going to be completely obsolete in, I don't know, 6 months, a year. We'll be using something completely different. So being at the point where you can get the best of this stuff, I think is really, really important. Okay, so thank you, Nick, for your very nice comments. That was great. What else have we got here? Let's have a look. There's a question here about working in a company that operates in a highly governed environment. How could a self-service platform help our devs in their day-to-day work? Well, it's absolutely ideal working in a highly governed environment, because if it's highly governed, then presumably your devs are taking a lot of time to figure out how to tick the boxes on that governance. And again, maybe that's a process that happens regularly and you know how to do it, and it's not really that bad. Maybe you have to make sure that your logs go to a certain place. Maybe your code has to get audited. on a regular basis by an auditor, etc. These things are effectively SME type stuff that I talked about earlier, which you can codify into the platform. So just so long as you can justify and fully show how the platform itself can be governed, then a lot of the time a platform like this can take care of the governance for you, because we're just doing the same things often. Sorry, I don't mean to trivialize working in governed environments, but a lot of it is it's the same. It's you can do certain things, you can't do certain things, and the things that you can't do, you can codify. So hopefully that helps. What else? How much time have we got? A few more minutes. At what scale does it become necessary for an organization to consider building its own platform versus leveraging pre-existing solutions? Are there specific indicators? I'm always going to say buy here. I don't mean goodbye because the webinar's over. Sorry, terrible dad joke. We talk about the big organization problem, and what tends to happen in large organizations is that due to a combination of the way that the organization works and interacts with itself, these organizations tend to end up thinking that they are special and not like everybody else, and therefore they need a custom solution. So referring back to the answer I gave on AI a few minutes ago, this stuff is changing. It's not changing as fast as the AI stuff is changing, but it is evolving. And I would always recommend that people try and buy this stuff in, because you get to take advantage of how it is growing and how it is evolving in even in a massive company. Also, you'll probably find that a smaller company is inevitably going to buy this stuff in, because to build it just costs disproportionately more. If you've got like 2 platform engineers building a platform and you've only got 10 developers, then your return on investment is going to be relatively low. So specific indicators, I think I'd probably steer away from that if possible, because my answer, given the work that I do in transformation, is often that if you're not in a position to be able to use this stuff off the shelf, then you're probably either very unusual, no, really actually unusual, or you're doing something not quite right. And by doing something not quite right, that's again a bit of a contentious statement, in that if you can't use the things that the majority of people out there are using, then it's possibly a sign that something else is amiss. But again, that doesn't go down too well in a non-transformational context. So yeah, I think if you're looking at these things and thinking, well, actually, there are some hard blocks on doing these things. Maybe the relationships that I talked about and these consultative approaches can't necessarily work because of nearshoring or outsourcing environments. Maybe there are, maybe the governance that I talked about earlier and trivialized, sorry, is actually a significant blocker to doing some of those sort of things. And you do actually need to build them internally. Perhaps you have a ban on running cloud services. Hopefully not in this day and age. Okay. I think that's probably all we've got time for. Let's wrap it up. Hopefully that's been good for you. Hopefully it's provided more questions than it's answered. Everyone's going to go off and help their developers do everything. Come and find me if you want some help with that. Always willing to talk about it. Come and find me if you think what I've just said is a load of rubbish, because I'd equally love to make it better. So thank you for tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.